Well, hi, folks. Thank you for joining us. At this point of the year, we've all been very busy at Eric's Curiosa, and as we move into the holidays, it's time for some reflection. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the experiences we've had in the studio this year, the highs, the lows, things we've achieved, and myself and Eric are going to talk first of all, and then we're going to hand over to our design and development team, and they're going to get into it a little bit in terms of the cards themselves. We may have a little surprise at the end, so stay tuned. Eric, it's been a busy year, mate. We've been had a lot going on this year, so I think I feel good about our success. But for you, what's been the highlight of this year?
Well, the highlight is, it's pretty much always to see people actually enjoy the game and talking about their stories. And it includes both seeing so many photos of people from stores and playing tournaments with, a much more accessible beta price-wise. People can actually get their hands on the cards, and that's awesome. And this goes, not just people in stores, even many of our distributors have played draft, and they come back with stories in their emails about what happened in their games, and then they sort of have to interrupt themselves and get back to the business content of the emails.
So it's not all work, basically. We do make time for a lot of fun. I know that you and the team iterate on playtesting a fair amount as well. I know you've been busy with Arthurian Legends. I guess just talking a little bit about what we've had to achieve this year. Obviously, it's been pretty challenging. We started this year with having to deliver a Kickstarter, and we had some significant delays. I think we've talked about being a small company many times before, and we don't want to use it as an excuse, but it's kind of the reality of our trajectory that we started off fairly small and we grew. I think the success we've seen has been kind of planned, but also a little bit unexpected. We knew, I have full confidence in the product after seeing it for the first time. I remember chatting to you, Eric, and say, "Hey, I just want to be part of this. Let's get it done." And it took off from there. But I think that what's your sort of the biggest issue that you remember from Kickstarter?
It's just everything taking. It's not just taking a little bit more time than expected, and it's not just taking the double amount of time that's expected, but it's like 4 times as long. Like every little step takes a lot longer, and there's so much hidden work that you don't really think about that happens, and then things that come up and you have to deal with them. But that's also interesting. Just problem solving. You just you solve any problem that come up. That's kind of any sort of small business and like the entrepreneur side of it.
I guess I found that what happened is we encountered one issue which we fixed, and when you start hitting multiple issues, that's where the timing really gets thrown out. You fix one problem, you think, okay, we got through that, fantastic, and then it's like, and then there's this, and working internationally, there's this delay between us and the people doing the dispatch and all of this other stuff, and it became just like it was a lot of work. It was quite stressful. So I must say, in terms of Kickstarter, I think it provided us with a really good way of getting the product out there. But I've been much more comfortable with our retail model, one set a year, which is very deliberate. In terms of a lot of people are saying to us at the moment, "Hey, we really would like it if you can do more than one set a year." And we've spoken about this a ton in terms of the work it takes to get things just right. Do you think there's ever an opportunity for us to do more than one set a year?
Well, I think it is important here to take the pace that the project deserves. So basically having a hard limit, a hard quality threshold that you can never go under. So yes, I would very much like to release more products and more cards and so on. But at the same time, Well, it's just the core of the project is to have the product, like the quality really high, and every card having a purpose. Nothing is just added quickly for no reason.
Hmm.
But with that said, we are set up to increase production speed, in the sense that under the hood in the company, there's a lot of procedures. Like, for example, the card export, like just the process of having designed cards in a spreadsheet and getting it to print files. We have a much more automated process now in place that will kick in starting with Arthurian Legends. That will make, well, it's not only faster, it reduces the amount of mistakes that can be made, and it lets a lot of more people work on it at the same time, rather
Yeah.
than just having it be like these gigantic Photoshop files on my computer that I have to split them in like several files because they take too much time to load and so. So there's a lot of hidden stuff that is getting better, and procedures that are just much more smooth, that will let us concentrate more than on just card design, feature design, just producing content faster and better. And I think also that the team is getting bigger and more experienced as well. So there's issues that we solve that now we know how to do them, and it will allow production to be faster. And the same actually goes for the rules of the game. Part of the Kickstarter development was that we're developing and polishing cards at the same time as we're sort of solidifying the rules more and more. And that's, every change you do kind of changes 10 things elsewhere. But we're mostly past that now, where the rules are kind of set in stone. Then you can just sort of, well, it almost feels like we can machine gun out cards compared to before.
Careful.
It's not quite like that.
No, not quite machine gun. It's going to be like a steady flow. So, but I think that obviously the demand's there. People really want to enjoy the product and have more of it. So, I think that fundamentally, that the messaging in one set a year is the fact that we want to really have a really high bar for quality. The product needs to be absolutely excellent. There's no space for us to do anything less, because people now expect it after alpha and beta. But that said, if we can potentially become more efficient, if we can scale the team, then that makes sense. You know, if I look back to the Kickstarter, I remember kicking it off with you. It's one of the issues that you have is that when you're busy, scaling is a big problem, because you just need to get the stuff in front of you done. Even thinking about adding other people to the process is fairly challenging. How does this compare to video games? Because obviously a lot of people are aware of your legacy with grinding gear games, and it's not something we've spoken about widely previously. But how does it compare to working on a very high level production AAA title?
Well, the company size and the way that, so with Path of Exile and Grinding Gear Games, we had it was a good 15 years to build a team and put procedures in place, and you have specialized people in every role after a while. But with Sorcery, then you jump to a situation where everyone kind of does everything, or like something has to be done, and you have, well, the people at hand just has to
Get it done.
adjust and deal with it, whatever the thing is, which has its charm in a way, but it also is, well, it's much harder in a way. And, well, yeah, the time it takes to, first you have a problem, and then you have to sort of find out how to solve it, like do the actual problem solving, instead of you already know the solution, and then you just implement, which
Yeah.
is often the case in when you have a much larger team. There will, of course, even with a very large team, you have some people that focus on making completely new things and sort of researching things and so on. But you get sort of the specialization there. And yeah, it's just a very different feel. But I also like the small company feel. I like quite a lot as well, because
Yeah.
everything is just more personal, and yeah, there isn't things that happens that you don't know about as much and so on. So
I think it's fair to say we've learned a lot in 2 years, from being aspirationally having a fantastic game of high production quality to delivering on that. There's some lessons to be learned, and it's I think most people would experience the same thing. Do you miss working on video games at all?
No, I don't think my brain really works like that. It's always sort of thinking ahead of time and at like, well, several sets in advance, almost, with sort of
Careful,
new angles on sorcery. So yeah.
yeah, we don't want to get into spoiler territory just yet. But so one aspect of this is that when we first met, obviously we're working on the alpha product, and you had some ideas about potentially what would follow. What made you select Arthurian Legends? And what, without giving away too much, were there other candidates under consideration that you may thought that may follow the alpha and beta releases?
So the Arthurian Legends was the idea was, I had it very early on, actually, and the idea was to, almost as a statement to so this is circling back to sorcery not having, well, the story is in the hand of players, and we create sort of a toolbox of monsters and spells and so on.
Yeah.
And with as opposed to, as a company, trying to create this IP and your own characters. So it's a very corporate thing to create your own story and your own IP, so that gets a value in itself that you then, in, I don't know, a decade or two, you can sell for a lot of a lot of money, or like make a movie franchise about it and so on, like that. But sorcery tries to go against that type of corporate thinking, and almost deliberately not create a brand like that. And part of that is using a existing mythology and existing themes that aren't, it's not, well, it's just a historical thing. It's not an intellectual property that someone owns. So it has some advantages and disadvantages. So an advantage is, of course, that it has a lot of, what would you call it? Like, it has a lot of flavor built into it, and people know, you don't have to do the work of building up characters. People already know that Arthur is impressive, so to speak. But and the corporate downside is, of course, that, yeah, then you don't, like, we don't have a Arthurian brand that we can sell down the line. But so be it. And Arthurian Legend is also something that, well, seems like everyone likes it, and it seemed like always seemed kind of natural. The game also has a little bit down to earth medieval style in a way. So exploring that side even further has been very nice.
Do you feel that that's core to potentially what sorcery is then, to always have that feel of having maybe like a high fantasy setting, which we joke about the cyberpunk set and things like that, but that's not really a direction that we want to go in with sorcery, is it?
Yeah, so with the Arthurian style, so sorcery, this wasn't entirely deliberate, but you have this kind of down to earth feel, almost, with like earth foot soldiers and so on, that they are in the world, and they walk around there, and then they get
Killed very
accosted
quickly.
by all
Yeah.
these, like, uh, demons and like void walking minions and things, like
Even
attacking
frogs.
them from, they
Yeah,
get attacked from the side and from below by like burrowing scorpions and things like, and in an Arthurian set you can, like, that almost goes to the extreme where you have the sort of medieval villagers being attacked by huge sort of mythical beasts and so on, and then the knights come and protect them.
yeah. No, that's really cool. I think I was surprised how so the Arthurian mythos is something which is people have an idea, but it's not actually from one source. It's multiple different sources, and so there's the ability to play within that a little bit. And one of the issues that I have, obviously, not having a strong character brand and stuff like that, it's quite challenging for me to actually position that sometimes. But I think that the characters are the stories that the players tell with the pieces that we provided in the game itself. So it kind of does come full circle. It very much feels like a role playing type initiative. And we do have some characters. We have a Grandmaster Wizard and Apprentice Wizard that have proven quite popular in some of our videos as well. Maybe we'll be hearing more from those guys in the near future. But I'm very much delighted with the way that our community have really embraced the project. When we started this out and went to Kickstarter, we had some kind of, I think, fairly low projections on that spreadsheet. Remember that? Where we said, well, what about if we hit here? What about if we hit there? And we thought, okay, well, let's go with this number. I'm not going to disclose what it was. So we'll make some
I,
stretch
I,
goals.
I just remember that I was on the higher side of the
You were
expectations.
actually. I was slightly more reserved because I think I'd seen other Kickstarters and how they've sort of like started and what the trajectory, and I kind of thought, well, just talking about the amount of people that are signed up for a mailing list and things like that, and just trying to extrapolate that. I knew the game was excellent, and so we came up with some numbers, and I remember we aligned the stretch goals with that number quite stupidly, and we kind of blew through those in. I don't remember. It's like a day, wasn't it? And then we had to come up with other stuff after that. So one
Yeah.
of the issues that we had is that we actually had to reach into some of the art pieces to use those as some of the promo cards, which people love, and it's kind of the charm of the project as well. Some of the, I wouldn't say missteps, but things we've had to do which were fairly sort of like non-deliberate, and then people have realized. I think one of the stories we love is obviously with the tokens, where there's a little bit of a mix up with the printer there, and they've become a firm favorite. So as we move forward to the beta edition, I know that we've really strived to make it widely available to folks around the world, and what we've seen is obviously the increased adoption of product. People really enjoy playing with it and stuff. Um, we've spoken internally about potentially what we could do next in terms of ensuring products out there, and I think it's fair to say that a lot of people are waiting for some information as to potentially what we're going to do. Foundationally, however, we want to be quite careful about those types of decisions because there's a lot of people who care a lot about that as well. So we're going to be we don't have anything to announce yet, and we're still making some decisions about how we facilitate more people playing sorcery. Um, I think with the beta edition, that what's your general impression from our community in terms of the content, the things that you've seen? What's really stood out for you this year from the kind of things that people have done with the game?
Done with it. Well, it's again just seeing people playing and having fun, and I guess one thing is how people treat it as a very precious thing. Uh, so this goes a little bit into the collector side of things.
Hmm.
But one specific detail I have is where I look out for photos from people playing where they keep the plastic on the playmat.
I knew you were going to say that. Yeah.
It's like protect keeping their playmat from getting dirty.
Yeah.
That certainly shows some dedication in keeping their well, not just cards, but anything related to sorcery in top condition.
Yeah, I think we should invest in some playmat sleeves, branded playmat sleeves for
Yeah,
people. So they could.
that's the next step. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, talking about next steps, obviously Arthurian Legends is something we've spoken about quite a lot. And we've spent a lot of time on developing. Could you give us an update as to where that currently stands? How mature is that, and what kind of work do we have left?
I just have to mention one more thing about sleeves, which is that people buying and selling booster boxes wanting the plastic seal outside to be in top condition. So the next step then is, of course, to have a plastic sleeve outside the plastic wrap to keep the plastic wrap in good condition.
Right.
But then you get the next step where you have the plastic protection for the shrink wrap to be, you have these like layers and layers of plastic protection to keep it in super good condition. Sorry. So an update on Arthurian Legends and uh, the progress there. Well, we're waiting on the last few art pieces, so that's like one area that I'm really close to. Where this time around we are actually very finished with the game design of things. I guess there will always be some really small tweaks all the way towards the end, but it's actually been very playable, especially in limited for a long time. We started very early on to playtest it a lot with limited, so there's some relatively big, well, not really changes, but we have some big things to make uh, that experience quite a lot better and make the draft picks matter more in certain cases, and making deck building choices also matter quite a lot more. So that is great. Otherwise, with Arthurian, so we're preparing some print files now and doing some print tests as well, just to make sure that our new. So what I touched on earlier, like our procedures for exporting the cards and the print files, so that it requires a little bit of extra testing just to make sure that everything works exactly fine now. So we have some steps where we will do some physical test prints and send them over to here in New Zealand and to Simon and look at them and check that this procedure is everything is working completely correct. Yeah, so that's.
I'm just waiting for you just to go just a little bit too far with some of the reveals here, mechanical stuff maybe, and but I think one thing we decided actually, which people may not be aware of, is following during the production of the beta version, we made a strong commitment to really double down on Arthurian Legends. I think we had some choices. You know, we could have done a smaller, like discrete product at some point between, maybe to give people something. But fundamentally, people really wanted to have the next set. They wanted to have more cards. They wanted to increase the card pool. So it made sense for us to do that as well. One thing you touched on was the drafting experience, and I know that a lot of folks have actually drafted both alpha and beta. At Gen Con, we had some events there, and I've seen multiple different stores with people talking about their experiences. We feel it's something that we kind of want to support more. Could you talk a little bit about kind of the structure of drafting, understand what that sealed experience could be, and potentially how we want to facilitate that to make it easier for people to enjoy it?
Well, for you have the kind of technical, or maybe technical is the wrong word, but the experience, like the draft picking experience when you pick, or the choices you make, where we will have these draft kits with sites that both make it so that it's very easy for people to have sites that are ready to add to their decks. But they are also these much lower power sites, which means that any sites that show up in the booster packs will be big upgrades for your deck, and it will actually be interesting uh, to pick a site over a minion, for example, or a spell. So that's a big, probably the biggest improvement, I would say, for the sort of tournament type of or the sort of skill test type of play when it comes to limited.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's a big one. We also play tested, especially draft, but also limited, quite a lot more with Arthurian Legends than we did with Alpha. So Alpha still works really well for that because of how well, we were all kind of draft players from other games, so um, almost subconsciously it gets kind of designed for that to a large degree. But here it was play tested much more specifically to make for interesting choices.
Yeah.
Even very deep into your booster pack where there's like 5 or 4 cards left, the choices can really matter.
I think that's really what it's about when you're drafting. You want to continue to feel engaged. You don't want it to be like a snapshot at the start where it's all the excitement. Let me pick out either the big hits or the cards which you don't want it to be make or break. You want to have choices throughout the draft itself. So as you get further into each of the packs, you actually can actually make more good choices about what you're going to do. And I think that's one of the things that I really love about sorcery is the fact that there are multiple different ways of really enjoying it. Obviously, there's the constructed side where people have very tuned decks, very efficient ways of playing, but also when we get into these other formats as well. I think through direct support, we hope to see a lot of success there. So no, that's going to be fantastic.
Just,
I guess
just
that yeah, go ahead.
sorry, if I can mention a sort of counterpoint to the draft and sealed here is that Arthurian Legends also has a incredibly large number of cards that will matter to people's constructed decks, and a lot of this is due to the rarity system in sorcery, where we can push the power level quite a lot on elite and especially unique cards. So there can be quite a lot of cards that upgrade the deck without causing. You don't want to get to a situation where you have 4 copies of a card where we sort of missed the balance.
Right.
It is slightly off. So in sorcery, well, there will be some cards that slip through and they are kind of too good, but at least you can most likely only have 1 or 2 in your deck. And so, yeah, sure. You will sometimes lose against a broken unique card, but it's not every game.
So, in terms of balance, then looking forward, because obviously with an increased card pool, we're going to see more and more of this type of stuff. What's your preference in terms of how we deal with cards that are seen to be powerful? Our kitchen table roots means that it's not something which we're completely focused on, but there may be some slightly more egregious interactions that we want to take care of. Have you given it any consideration potentially about how we deal with that in the future?
Well, we would have kind of official rules and errata, but I would actually also very much see people play as they want to with house rules.
Hmm.
But with that said, sorcery is very robust against sort of abusive strategies. Again, coming back to the rarity system, and yeah, sure, some cards have proved to be a little bit too good, but at least people are still playing minions and sort of smacking each other down with minions. So the game still functions like it
Right.
was meant to function. So there is that, but it seems like we did some kind of you could call it tests almost. Like so, Infiltrate in the TTS league got an errata to it to work more like the intended sort of. This was what the card was supposed to do, and that errata was very well received actually. So when it comes to erratas, it's always a very big worry to sort of upset people and just cause problems. But in that case, it seemed to work really well. With that said, of course, we will try to avoid that as much as possible.
Yeah, I think so. As we scale out our 2024 plans to incorporate the Play SorceryTCG.com network, so people can register with stores for credentialized events to start acquiring dust. Our hope is to be able to give a lot more guidance to what stores need. It's always been our intent, I think, to keep things fairly flexible, but also I'm kind of conscious of the fact that people ask for direction as well. So we want to find a healthy balance between the two. I think some will be sort of like sanctioned events where they follow a specific type of format or rule, but other than that, we really want to encourage people to play freely with the game as well. Moving into our dust plans, obviously those are things that are still in production. We're currently producing a whole variety of different rewards, and we can continue to commit to that moving forward as well. We hope people like what they've seen so far, and if there's any feedback or anything else that people want to see, please let us know, because really it's to reward your time that you spend with the game, either through product acquisition, participation, or even achievement as well. So we'd like to be able to scale out those plans. With us, Dust is I wouldn't say it's a risk, but it's certainly a gamble. It's certainly something that we feel the product demands, the project demands, for it to be seen to be special to people. We want to create this like system of loyalty that people can work towards. I guess that what we would like to do is really kind of like close the loop for the players. I think it's quite clear that a lot of people like to collect sorcery, and we're fairly mindful of that. But we do want people to more people to be able to play it. I think when we get into the cycle of Arthurian Legends, our aim is to make that product more widely available for sure, so more people can enjoy it. I think that just to sort of wrap things up, we talked about the highlights and lowlights, but what do you want to happen next year? What's your aspirations for next year, and also what's cooking at the moment? Because we keep talking about how we've kind of like finished one cycle for Arthurian Legends. What have you got going on now?
Well, future things is
We
like
talk a little bit about the future, I
a,
think,
a tiny bit.
tiny bit.
Yeah, not quite sure what you mean with.
Well, I think it's fair to say we've currently got the next set in development.
Oh yeah, well the way it works, there's some vague plans even for several sets. So obviously I shouldn't mention anything here. But with the pipeline, the way it works, there's actually a fairly significant amount of art being made already for the next set after the Arthurian set, and and a little bit of art even being made for the two sets after that. So there's always a lot of new art and things moving through the pipeline, which it was surprising to get a question about that, because usually we try to never go too far forward.
Well, but I've been reading the comments, and people always want to know kind of the future, because let's face it, people have committed to this being the hobby, and so I think it's fair that we become more transparent over time. It's a lesson that I've learned for sure. People asking for more information. It's one of those things. Do you find at this stage, like so early with the next set, it's the most exciting time? What for you actually? So what happens right now? Is it a case of you had come up with the ideas for the cards, you guide people in terms of the art? What would you do at this stage?
Well, in a way, it's some of the some of the most interesting and sort of inspiring stages, where you for example look up really cool themes that are, or really cool card themes that are on theme with the overall set. So that type of thing is very exciting, and also looking for specific artists that fit for this set, or and even trying to find artists that might have existing art that you can license that fits a certain theme. So that part is really exciting. And also, well, we keep talking about the highly thematic nature of Arthurian Legends. This next set will be a little bit more open, which uh, it gives a little bit more freedom to kind of attack game mechanics that the game likes. So, as an example, there in an Arthurian set, you wouldn't have so much about the like cards that move sites around. Like it's hard to see, I don't know, castles kind of sliding around on the battlefield that
Right.
much.
Yeah.
Maybe you can do a little bit, but I guess the next set can be a little bit crazier mechanics wise compared to Arthurian Legends, even though Arthurian Legends has quite a lot of new cool stuff too. It's a little bit
Yeah,
more
it does.
grounded in that
It
way.
has some very special moments and some of the sites for sure. It's very enjoyable, sort of seeing it all play out. But I think that we kind of like maybe oscillate back to the some of the more sort of like fantastical type of mechanics and moments that people want to see. So I think we've said enough on this. Obviously, it'd be great to talk about it in more detail, but with one set a year, we kind of have to be a little bit guarded. So I think overall, I'd like to take an opportunity to really thank our community for their continued support. It makes this so much easier knowing that people are huge fans of the work that Erik and the team do to produce the game, and for people to really embrace it, as Erik said, as their game. It's very special to us. We're dedicated to making sure that this game can be as awesome as possible, and it's not awesome in the word like, oh, that's awesome. It's actually awe-inspiring. It's a cool game that makes people think, that makes people really sort of enjoy sharing it with friends as well. It's tremendously important, and we think we've set the groundwork. We've still got a lot of work to do, and for people who've experienced delays and potentially issues of product availability, we do apologise because we're kind of a victim of our own success to a degree. Our aim is to be a lot more transparent moving forward, and obviously to ensure that product is more widely available. That's something that we really want to be able to do. Fundamentally, however, we want our community to start taking over, to really own the game, to feed back to us what they need, because that's really a measurement of success. When people really take it on as their thing as well, then we can certainly give you all the pieces that you need to make that quite fulfilling. Right. Any last thoughts, Erik, before we hand over to our development team?
Well, I guess I should just wish everyone a good holiday, and a few hours after this is being recorded, I'm heading back home to Sweden, and I'll actually get to play some Sorcery with family and friends back there. So that will be awesome.
Great. I know you've been training hard, so you can take them all out. So yeah, that should be an enjoyable
I
experience.
will win. I will win all games. No take backs allowed.
Yeah.
I'll power game them.
Fantastic. That's what I like to hear. Awesome. Well, we're going to hand over now to Mike, Rafa, and Sean on our development team, and they can talk a little bit about their experiences in 2023.
So as the year comes to an end, we want to take this opportunity to pause and reflect on just how much has happened over the past year. So I'm here with the design team, and let's dive into what it's been like on the design side of things for the past, say, 12 months. So, for all of you, like, you've been involved with the design of Sorcery in different ways since its inception to somewhat more recently. How has the game changed since the pre-Kickstarter iteration up until beta? What are some of the major elements that have shifted?
I can speak a little bit on that. This was there for the Kickstarter and pre-Kickstarter part of development. And at its core, Sorcery's been the same, right? So in that sense, not a lot has changed. But there are definitely very relevant changes in terms of the rules being like simplified where it should have been, just small things that just made things cleaner, easier for new players to learn the game. And also just like overall, like the card design and card balance. We even had the opportunity to have like a big part of the community join us on the pre-alpha playtest campaign, and got a lot, I mean, a lot of feedback back then that was very helpful. It's just such a big card pool, more than like 400 cards, and with a small team at the time, it's like a little hard to kind of test everything, make sure that things were at a state that we're like really happy with. And so we were able to really like refine things further during that last part of the of development. And the game, as you can see now with alpha and beta out there, like is at a very, very good state. People are enjoying the game. They're having lots of fun. So yeah, so that was I think the biggest change.
And Mike, how about you? What do you see as maybe some of the particular milestones that there's been in the design process of the past year?
Yeah, so I came in kind of towards the end of what Rafa was describing. I think the last couple of big alpha tests and stuff like that were kind of underway. So it was really cool to see this game like so close to being finished. One of the biggest milestones for me was getting the rulebook in place, and like getting, because there was a like a Word doc and some ideas that were kind of floating around, stuff like that, but starting to consolidate that a little bit into a solid set of rules. For me, that was kind of like a big, okay, now we're on to something here from now on. There would be a nice rule book that people can reference, they can share it across, they can get feedback to us and stuff like that. Like for me, that was a pretty big milestone, was getting that rule book in.
Yeah. And I feel like if people haven't picked up from your interviews before, you're like the process guy, right? You're great about getting everything lined up and set up, which is invaluable for helping things like, be on the right track for going forward. And as things have changed over the year, right, there's been a lot of, steps that Sorcery's gone through. At the time, really think about how do we maintain our core, right? And so when we think about Sorcery, a lot of times people are drawn to the art, but we've spoken a lot about the narrative importance and the thematic elements. How have you seen the thematic elements of Sorcery kind of evolve over the past year? Has that changed or stayed relatively static? What's that been like? Sean, maybe you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, as you mentioned, like the thematic or narrative nature of Sorcery is really a huge core part of its identity. I don't know if that's necessarily changed a lot. Maybe some of our focus on it has kind of changed. I know when I started at start of this year, one of the first things that I really pushed for and that we did was we had a couple of big meetings in the design team where we kind of sat down and codified a bunch of this thematic stuff. So things that had existed that like Rafa and Erik had talked about a lot and had all this information in their heads about like the identity of the different elements and that kind of thing. And so getting everybody together and having these meetings and discussions and getting it all codified and written down so that we're all kind of on the same page of, what makes a fire spell, or if here's this mechanic, does that feel like it should be in fire or in air?
Yeah, it's interesting because Sorcery has kind of a tension between being thematic but not being too thematic, right? Like because it very much wants the players to create their stories and to be the person who's creating the what's happening in their realm between them. With you and your opponent, you're basically telling the story of this particular realm. So we don't want to break that with like a really heavy, like slap a narrative on top of that. Like these are the hard, fast rules of like, this is how you're supposed to envision how this world goes. But at the same time, we do have to provide a little anchor points here and there for people to kind of understand, like this is how these elements interact, as Sean was saying, or this is. These are how
I think
mechanics can kind
you
of
and I
reflect
might had a bunch of discussions about this, like when I first joined, because I think this is where one of those focus shifts was happening. Where, much like yourself, I think I came in with this impression of like, oh, it'd be cool if there was this overarching thing, or like some structure behind everything that we could base stuff off, and that getting more involved with the sorcery community and getting into the design of the cards and things has definitely shaken that expectation off me.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like coming from my background in like historical games, it's like there's always some massive narrative to kind of connect the stories to that are part of this meta narrative, if you will. It was very much in Erik's original vision to not necessarily provide that, and because it's much more powerful to let players create that for themselves. There's more ownership of the stories if they're allowed to have that freedom and to create it. And that was a point of growth in my own personal design career, like letting go of that over meta narrative and letting players actually create that themselves, because it's created a much stronger and a much more appreciable product as a result of something being able to kind of go that deep on your own. You have a sense of ownership of it, which is fantastic. So yeah,
maybe grabbing in on that then, it's in the learning that skill, letting go of it. Well, what challenges and opportunities maybe does Arthurian Legends bring then? Because that's you're talking about how you're kind of removing a strict narrative. Well, Arthurian Legend does already have a certain framework, right? So what challenges does that bring?
Yeah, you definitely, like when you have a real theme heavy theme, it comes with a bunch of expectations, right? You're gonna have Arthur, you're gonna have whatever, you're gonna have Lancelot, you're gonna have the love triangle. You know, like people are
allegedly.
Well, yeah. So you've got all of these themes that are in people's heads, and it's created an expectation that they're going to be in that set. So the biggest challenge, I would say, and I'll let Sean and Rafa jump into it, because they're the ones who were doing the hard yards on this, is like figuring out how do you take those expectations and put them through the lens of sorcery, which is, we want people to create their own stories. So yeah, how'd you guys find that? What were some of the challenges in that space?
Well, one of the things that is directly related to what we're just talking about now, which is like this, like what does an element look like? What's identity as an element, right? And like laying down those foundations where people can tell their stories, right? So like when you're playing fire, like what expectations does a fire mage has, right? Like those sort of the answer to those questions was something that we're kind of discussing, and that played a crucial role when we started designing Arthurian Legends, because things there were less obvious to begin with, right? So yeah, sure, have a major explosion or like meteors coming down from the skies, like, yeah, that feels pretty fire to me. But what about like this card about, this particular knight here, and that this other card is not like obviously like fire, right? Or obviously water. And so having those discussions about the elements first, right? And kind of like getting all the team on the same page was, in my opinion, like one of the biggest challenges, but one that we're able to be successful after a lot of conversations and discussions.
Yeah, it's like leaning into the descriptors that you see on the precon boxes, right? Like this card might not literally be a creature made of fire, but it's displaying passion or destruction, and so it fits.
Well, kind of going back to that ideas then of, how do you actually design cards then? I know we've talked about this on some level before, but what is the actual process for designing a card? And let's tie that into, Arthurian Legends maybe a little bit here. So if you're going to make a card for Arthurian Legends, like how does that start?
Yeah, there's a lot of starting points, because it's
especially in this set.
There's a lot of starting points. We kind of pride ourselves on top-down design, and we do with the assumption that the top is kind of like the art, the presentation of the card. it's always plays a crucial part in Sorcery's delivery is what the art looks like, and it's always amazing art, and it takes up a good portion of the card, and so that kind of has to dictate quite a bit of how we create the card. But sometimes at the very start of a project, you don't have that art. And so this is where you're kind of starting to design cards with concepts in mind. You might fling some of those concepts to the artists, and the artists can work with them. But sometimes you get a concept kind of in, semi in a good spot, and then you get the art back, and it's not quite 100% aligned. So then you might want to realign your card to match what the art will look like. You may not necessarily delete that old idea. That might go into the warehouse for a future expansion idea, but there might be a way to kind of tweak that card or change it or something like that when we see the art.
Yeah, it's a great example of this. Like, I won't name any names, but let's say we send off a request to an artist for, hey, here's this particular named knight that we want some artwork of, and we come up with an ability based on their stories and based on the mythology around them, and then the art comes back, and the art depicts them on a horse. We're like, oh, well, okay, well, if this version that we're showing here in the artwork has them on a horse, maybe they should be a little fast in the realm, a little faster than regular. So now maybe we'll see if we can add in like a movement +1 or something to the ability.
Yeah. So then the art and the game text are working together to help the player understand how to use the card. So if you think of something like Craterized, for example, you look at that card, you know what's going to happen. things are gonna be craterized pretty decisively. So you're already in the mindset of what this card is going to do, and then the game text just kind of fills in the details about how to execute that. Yeah. So in a way, the card it carries a huge amount of like narrative or cognitive load, really, of each card. You're like, okay, cool, I know exactly how this is going to work. So a big part of our job in creating cards is to make sure that those two things are basically synced, that we've got that the ability and the art are all harmonizing and with each other, and then also, and I'm sure Rafa could talk about this, and also make sure that it's balanced, right? So because that's the other side of the equation.
And that's usually the first experience people have, right? They see a card, what they see pretty much like the artwork, right? So like Mike was saying, is like that's what kind of that set expectations, right? That like you see this big meteor is like, yeah, this got to do a lot of damage, right? So it's and we really like strive for obviously perfection, but like we put a lot of effort to make sure that the elements are cohesive, right? And that and we've had situations where like we had an expectation maybe for certain art, sometimes based on like Erik's like initial concept of a particular card or art direction, and art came in and is like, yeah, I guess we're changing this entirely, right? And that happened even back in alpha, where there were a couple of cards where we didn't quite feel like we couldn't reach like a standard that we're proud of, and there were cards like, yeah, let's work on this one maybe next set or 2 sets from now, because we really want to respect the art and this cohesive design of each element.
It's happened a few times, right, where a piece of artwork is really amazing and we want to use it, but we haven't been able to figure out a mechanic or something that really sells this artwork. So the whole thing kind of gets, maybe we'll put that in the vault and it'll show up in the next set, or at least in the next set we'll have another chance to have a crack at it and revisit that mechanic and see if we can find something that really fits.
And I think we're kind of bringing up Arthurian Legends a bit here, but as a retrospect for past year, you work a little bit ahead here, and so actually a significant portion of last year was spent on Arthurian Legends. But thinking about what Rafa was talking about with how challenging it can be sometimes with cards and matching with art or just the general feel, looking back to beta and alpha over this past year, were there any cards that you felt like you really struggled to get right at that time, or that you felt were really, really challenging, but now you feel like are in a great spot?
One comes to mind, and I imagine it's the same answer from everybody.
My
3,
nemesis.
2, 1.
Wave Shaper.
Wave Shaper.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Well, who's gonna spill the tea on that one? Then? What's the deal with the Wave Shaper here?
I'll leave that one to you guys.
I'd say
I don't know if I'm ready.
Too soon. We just hit like a hidden trauma here. Sean, do you want to start us off?
there's a good there's a section in my kind of work notebook that I keep my stuff in, and it's just a spread where I think I have about 20 to 25 post-it notes, and each post-it note is a different variation on the abilities that we were tossing around for the Wave Shaper. It just it went through a lot of iterations, a lot.
Yeah. Well, can you remember any of it? Like what? Because I just remember, and because I wasn't necessarily like fully engaged with each individual iteration, but when I was engaged, it was just like, to me, it was always the biggest struggle was justifying the art and the name, because that's another thing we maybe haven't touched on, is we loved the name so much, and because that connected to the art really well. But then there's that third, that ability was always kind of a little bit hard, because and it's also kind of like the other thing that's kind of influencing this was just acknowledging how hard it was sometimes to use the avatar water. So like there's kind of this idea that we want to try to restore a bit of balance. We want to lean into this name. We want to lean into the art, because the art looks like that's what the avatar is doing. It, that's creating something out of water. So what were some of the things kind of going through your guys' head when it came to like how to execute those things without getting, I guess, too deep into some traumatic memories?
I really needed like an avatar that supported like Water's main like play style in alpha, which is like waterbound minions, right? So like you need lots of water sites. You might need like a flood effect. Unfortunately, Avatar of Water was a little lackluster in terms of strength compared to some of the other stronger avatars. So I really wanted to like, give Water a really solid avatar that they could build around. And like Mike mentioned, just like all the elements, like the name and the art, like the sea, like some of the sea creatures that are in the artwork. There's like so many elements, and like balance being also like a big deal there. And luckily we had like a really solid group of play testers that really helped us out, like navigate that situation. And then we landed a really solid avatar that we're really proud of.
That one was a struggle. Is there any times that you can think of where like the card art came in and it was just like almost effortless, like everything just falls into place and you're like, oh, this just makes total sense. The stars have aligned.
Yeah, well, one that comes to mind, and I'll say, like, I didn't even design that one myself, but when I joined the team, like, like about 2 years ago, I had a lot to say. I was like, hey, I don't like this one much, or like I think we could maybe change, like take this into different directions. So I had like a good number of opinions to say the least. But one card is like, I saw that card, I was like, no, this is perfect. This is like, it's like sacred. I can touch it. And that one was like Headless Haunt for me. Like just every single thing about that card was just so ridiculously perfect that it's been one of my favorite cards ever since.
It's funny you mentioned that one, because that one was number 2 on my list. My number 1 is Sedge Crabs, and because again, just the idea that like it's just it can only go sideways, right? Like it hits that perfect level of humor. The image was humorous. The fact that it's a play on a meme as well was another one. That just like that card hit on every single level for me. And so, but what I found particularly compelling about that one, and also Headless Haunt, is that it uses the grid system to its bench to tell its story. You wouldn't be able to necessarily have a Sedge Crab story in a kind of an abstract arena style game. Same with Headless Haunt. It would be a little bit harder to kind of to sell that story without having the context of the grid. So that's a good one. That's a really good one.
Yeah, and Polar Bears too, right? Another like one of those pre-con cards, also been around for a while, and it just highlights one of Sorcery's like key strengths, right? Just like how thematic and fun those cards play out on a grid, right?
Yeah. The other one I would add to this list that I think artwork can affect mesh really, really well is Rolling Boulder.
Oh, good one.
But just like the artwork, we can see the little guy in the distance has pushed the boulder, and then it's just like going and crushing everybody. It's like, yeah, this all makes perfect sense. You push the boulder, and it goes and squishes a bunch of people.
You see all those parts of the cards are all working towards understanding how to use it, and
exactly.
That was it hit that perfectly.
And so, Switch Crabs kind of falls into this category that I think of as sorcery cute, where it's like the ability is like not game changing, but it makes it do something unique and, as you said, plays with the grid and perfectly fits the theme of the card in a fun way. It's just like, oh yeah, of course they cannot even move sideways. They're crabs. It's like,
yeah.
Well, and so you're coming up with all these cool card designs, and you're iterating and balancing them. But for a good portion of last year, people didn't have cards, right? And then as the Kickstarter fulfilled and it got out there, people are starting to play the game. So has your experience designing cards actually changed now that people are out there playing with the cards in hand? I see a lot of people nodding their head here. Mike, maybe you want to start us off with that.
It's put so much petrol in the tank for me. Like, and it means that I'm seeing people just creating stories has been one of the most invigorating experiences of this whole project. I would say more so than any other that I've been a part of. People are really passionate about the stories that they're creating in the game, and that kind of stuff really it has an impact on designers. So thank you so much for everyone out there who puts anything like that. You may not think that it's feedback. You might just be telling a story, but that's actually feedback for us. Like we know that you're enjoying it. It means that there are certain things that are important to you. Like oftentimes we can't tell you even who won or lost a match, but it's all focused on the fun stuff that happened in it. That stuff is really, really good. And it makes us want to go and design more cards with that do those things that can go and trigger more interesting and funny story states or story elements for you. So like that for me as a designer now, when I see people playing cards and I'm listening to the things that they're talking about, or they're telling their friends what was exciting about the game they just played, I'm listening to very, very closely to what makes that story, what was important to make that story work, and I'm making mental notes of it so that when we go into the next set, we provide more of that kind of stuff for people. So it's very much impacted how I design cards moving forward, is just seeing people playing the game and enjoying themselves and collecting all that feedback, that kind of passive feedback. It's fantastic.
There's a run-on effect from that, like a relief that like I expected this to happen, obviously, but like that little bit of relief when obviously before everything's out and it's very much in this kind of very vocal collector kind of persona in the community, and then people start getting their cards and more people start playing, and like you say, people posting up these kind of anecdotes and stories and just being like, oh shit, the game is really good.
We do kind of troll the comments, and we'll pass things along to the team too. If sometimes comments on YouTube videos or out on Reddit and the world, out there on the internet. So stories do get passed along. So we appreciate everyone sharing them online or in person. Rafa, how about you?
Yeah, like Mike mentioned, it's been really inspiring for me, and in terms of design, like just I think from like every one of those like card game personas, like collectors, players, like it's just everything, right? When we're designing those cards, we keep it all in mind, right? Like we understand like the collectability is a thing. We understand like even as people are looking at their cards and their binders, like they're kind of like thinking about maybe interactions, about stories, about themes, and I feel like just seeing people kind of interact with that from like in all those different ways, it's been really, really, it's been great. Like it's been really inspiring, and just like Mike said, just like feel for the tank is like, yeah, let's keep doing it. Let's keep designing like fun cards that people will play with, will collect, and they will be like just really look forward to just having their hands, you know. And I love all like the stories that people tell, even like early on when we had like the story about like the Littlefoot's named foot soldier, right? And just seeing like how sometimes like decks, maybe elements, but sometimes like even a single card, like how much they inspire people to like to tell stories and you know, like just share their joy with like family, right? And that's something we see like families, you know, playing Sorcery, enjoying the game, friends at home or at a local game store, just like seeing all those different ways that people are enjoying like the game and the cards that we worked so hard to design. It's, I mean, that I think that's the most rewarding thing at the end of the day.
So maybe as we start to wrap things up here, you know, looking back at the year, it's been a great year for Sorcery. A lot of your hard work has been paying off. What are you looking forward to for the upcoming year? Rafa, why don't we go in reverse order here?
We're looking for the most more Sorcery, I guess. Yeah, but I'm really excited about like the following sets, right? And to see how those different themes and different sets will like mesh together. And yeah, and I'm just looking forward to like seeing myself included, but everyone enjoy new cards and fun mechanics and kind of like new ways potentially to explore and enjoy the game.
Sean, how about you?
Very similar, very similar. Like as I mentioned, like I wasn't part of the team back when Alpha was being developed. I had a bit of a hand in shaping some of the beta avatars that were introduced. So obviously my big event that I'm looking forward to is seeing people's reaction to Arthurian Legends, because it's the first set that I've been really, really deep in the guts of.
And maybe some other outings from the Grandmaster Wizard. Who knows?
Yeah, we'll see. Let's see if he shows up. Notoriously tardy.
Mike, what about you?
Yeah, I have to echo the guys. What I'm really looking forward to is people having the pieces to tell their own Arthurian stories, and I look forward to reading those stories. I look forward to seeing these really important characters show up in open formats with all this old stuff from Alpha and Beta. But I'm really looking forward to seeing how people react with Arthurian Legends, and I'm so excited to see what content and stories that you guys will create in the next year. So keep up the good work.
We're going to wrap things up here, and we'll pass things over to Erik and Simon. Before we do, make sure you give a shout out in the comments below and give these guys some love for all the hard work they've been doing. If you got any cool stories or favorite parts of Sorcery, share them, and we'll go through the comments together and read them over. And with that, we're going to pass things on to Erik and Simon. We're going to lead us out.
So it's good to hear from our extended team. Thank you, Mike, Sean, and Rafa, for sharing your thoughts. Now, before we let you go, we're aware that people are always really desperate for more information. They always want to know more about what we're doing. And we've been quite reluctant to spoil anything because it's early on in the stage for our release cycle for Arthurian Legends. However, it's the holidays. And so we really hope that people can enjoy getting their family around the table.